Hello YouTube, Kaitlyn here, and today is Veda Day 19, and today we're going to talk about how to deal with the death of a loved one. This was a special request from Gwyneth W. I think she commented on at least 5 videos asking this question, so obviously it's very important to her, and I really wanted to talk about it. First off, because this question seems so important to you, I assume that either you or someone you know lost someone that you loved, and I want to send my condolences to you. So I really had to think deeply about this question because although I have lost people in my life, I don't really think about what I'm doing, how I'm grieving when I'm going through dealing with a death. It just kind of happens, but there are people who don't necessarily know how to deal with a death, or maybe they're wondering if they're dealing with a death correctly, which led me to 4 things that I think are important to think about when grieving a death. Number 1 is actually let yourself grieve. And understand that grieving might take many forms. It might be crying all the time, or it could be retreating into yourself, or reminiscing about your loved one. Or maybe you just want normalcy. You want to go about your life like nothing really happened, and even though you're kind of internalizing everything, you want the rest of your outside life to continue on its normal path. Understand that all of these forms of grieving are completely fine, that there's nothing wrong with how you choose to grieve. The important part is actually letting yourself grieve in whatever form it might take. Number 2 is find an outlet to help deal with your grief. Mine is typically music. I tend to like to retreat into myself and listen to relatively kind of depressing sounding music, and that seems like the opposite of what I should be doing, but I kind of like let myself go, be sad, and then I'm able to kind of move out of it eventually. In 2012, my grandfather died of leukemia, and I made this video called In Memoriam, which is just a little music video showing how I cope with grief in the form of listening to music. But your outlet for dealing with grief could be art or writing or filmmaking or even solving hundreds of math problems. You have to realize that distracting yourself from your grief can be helpful too. Number 3, you have to understand that everyone deals with grief differently, and so you may not always understand how the people around you are dealing with their grief and how it's different than your own. A good example of this would be when my grandfather died, my dad dealt with his grief by being really angry while I was very quiet, and so on the outside it didn't necessarily seem like I was grieving, but I definitely was on the inside. And this would really agitate him because I wasn't dealing with grief the same way he was, and so he would think that I wasn't dealing with it at all, that I wasn't even sad that my grandfather had died when I really was. So just remember that everyone's different, and don't assume that someone's not grieving just because they're not grieving in the same way you are. And number 4, know that you will find happiness again. Many times a death of someone close to you can make life seem meaningless or pointless. And so even though you're consumed by sadness now, you have to understand that you have to grieve in order to heal, but it's not going to be like this forever. Eventually you will be able to move on in life. Now this doesn't mean that you've forgotten about this person or you don't care about them anymore, but you have to continue living. Essentially know that there is a light at the end of this grief tunnel. Well, today's video has been a little bit more on the serious side, but I really hope that this will help you, Gwyneth, and anyone else who is dealing with or has dealt with a death of a loved one. And also I just want to make this point that the death of a loved one doesn't just mean like a human family member. Sometimes it can mean your dog or your cat. There's nothing wrong with grieving heavily for a beloved pet. Don't let anyone tell you different or shame you for loving your pet deeply. So today, why don't we share comments down below about a loved one that we have lost and maybe how we dealt with that grief, or even just reminiscing about them, because that can be helpful and healing. And remember to like, favorite, share, and subscribe if this video made you smile. See you guys tomorrow. Now I gotta go start my day after talking about death. All right, this is gonna be a low-key day.